Morning. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you all. What a great day to be alive, right? Awesome. So I'm a state representative for District 7. That's Giddings all the way up to Stanford. Just about a month ago, I threw my name in the ring to run for president. Not. Well, as she said, I was an attack pilot. Freshman class of 19, went out to the Air Force Academy and got to fly A-10s for Warthog. I think many of you who were here last year, I always enjoy showing what the A-10 shoots, 30 millimeter, about 50%. 50%. So I also got to flight MC-12s, did a lot of ISR in Afghanistan, pre-combat deployments, about 1,000 combat hours, and I was doing circles over Afghanistan. And I saw the American government, who were fighting to help the Afghans win back their freedom. In the meantime, I was hearing stories and news reports that we were slowly losing our freedoms here in Idaho. So I felt called to come back home and fight locally. So I've been in the legislature for 5 years, and I slowly started to see that the legislative process is surprisingly kind of broken. And so one of those topics where I think we're starting to see how our government is a little bit broken comes from critical race theory. About a year ago, I honestly had no idea what critical race theory is. And I'm not an expert, but I want to just show you a lot of visuals and pictures of where we're seeing it in Idaho. So we'll talk about what it is. Look at some of the federal, I guess you could say, mandates that are coming down. Look at our Idaho state laws. And then I want to talk about this legislative session where we saw it in a childhood development grant, where we're seeing it in K-12, where we're seeing it in higher education, even Idaho public television. How many of you watch Idaho public television? Awesome. And we'll talk really about the task force. So Elizabeth said I have about till 10:15, keep me honest, and then about 15 minutes of questions. But I'm not opposed to questions while I talk also. So please, if I say something that you don't quite understand, just throw up your hand and I'll be happy to walk through that. Okay. Can anybody, let's get a student, tell me what is critical race theory? Yes, sir, go ahead.
It's a theory, social theory based on Marxist principles, but instead of Karl Marx's economic-based classifications of people into oppressors and victims, it's race-based. That's the basic sum of critical race theories. It groups all people into oppressors and victims based on their race.
Outstanding. Yeah, good job. It was about 2 months ago, Boise School District had a meeting and they asked some officials who were running to be part of school boards and superintendents. Member of the audience asked the same question and not one of them could define what critical race theory is. So I'm super impressed that you know what it is. So this was a fun one that a bit of an eye chart, but you said a lot of it. We can look at where racism exists everywhere, in every situation, organization, in school, in law, in a system, and between every human relationship. And everything has to be seen through a lens of race, and people should not be judged as individuals, but rather by the color of their skin. I tried to summarize it. This is an eye chart again. I'm just going to look at the top one. So you have the parent of critical race theory is critical theory, and then that has lots of different subunits. But you're really kind of revealing these hidden biases. That's what they're claiming. And then they're saying that critical race theory is in our American government and that our culture is systemically racist. One of the, there's a couple of books that I reference times here. So we have the one side of the issue where they're promoting critical race theory, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. And then we have cynical theories, more of the other side of it, by Rose and Dr. James Lindsay. I'm going to reference these a little bit. In our task force that we have going on right now, Lieutenant Governor has organized a task force. I'm a co-chair. We had Dr. Lindsay present to us. And he said there's really two words to be on the lookout for to see critical race theory. Because you're not going to open up a textbook and see, hey, we're teaching you critical race theory now. You're going to start to see some other language, some other words. And two of those words that he mentioned is equity and privilege. And so start to think of, okay, where are you seeing equity? Where are you seeing the word privilege? Now that's kind of a highlight of now we're going to need to use the concepts of critical race theory. And I threw down a couple of examples here, and this is from their own definitions. And I want to just focus on this equity. Equity is not equality. So there, what it really means is giving everyone the same resources, giving each student access to the resources that they need to learn and thrive. And in their own definition, I highlighted it, is that it's not, equity is not the same as equality. It's more about distributing resources equitably to meet people's needs. So when you heard the phrase distributing resources, what do you think of? What form of government do you think of?
Socialism.
Absolutely. So keep that in your mind whenever you see this word equity. That they're advocating for an overthrow of our constitutional republic form of government for more of a socialist government, all with this phraseology of equity. And then the other one is privilege. So unearned advantages that result from being a member of a socially preferred or dominant social identity group. Privilege is the opposite of marginalization or oppression that results from racism and other forms of violence. So keep those in mind. I'm getting a lot of emails going across my desk. This one I just got last night. It's I think it was from a video on YouTube, but it was a really good visual picture of equity versus equality. So they're given capitalism versus socialism. The other phraseology we're starting to hear a lot is this whole, it's all based on outcomes. We want equal outcomes. I'm sure if you start to think about, you're hearing that, it's what's important, the outcome. And they want to try to make outcomes equal for everybody. Okay, so I want to just explain kind of the federal atmosphere from my very simple perspective. The whole concept of critical race theory goes back to actually when I think about before I was born, and it's just been brewing in academia. And then we saw this kind of curriculum rise up and called 1619 Project. Any of you guys familiar with that, hearing about it? So they're in your education curriculum, they want to start teaching that the United States didn't really start in 1776. It started in 1619 when the first African American slaves were brought to the continent. And that, they want to say, is the origin of America, not 1776. So President Trump tried to counter that, and he started the 1776 Commission to re-emphasize our origins of the nation. As soon as Biden took over in office, he got rid of the 1776 Commission and is now supporting 1619 Project curriculum. So that's where we're slowly starting to see it seep into all facets of our education system. to kind of make reference it as historical revisionism. We just are going to change our history as a nation in order to get rid of the republic and to bring in socialism. One of the most recent things that was brought up is Biden's Department of Education submitted a new rule that they want to improve or change the priorities on American history and civics education. So they, probably some of you have read it, several pages deep, but they have two priorities. And then the first one, they talk about, they want to, in our civics education programs, use projects that incorporate racially, ethnically, culturally, and linguistically diverse perspectives into teaching and learning. And I highlighted, you probably can't see it very much, but it talks about here, our country faces converging economic, health, and climate crisis that have exposed and exacerbated inequities, while a historic movement for justice has highlighted the unbearable human cost of systemic racism. Our nation deserves an ambitious whole of government equity agenda that matches the scale of opportunities and challenges that we face. The next underline, where it goes into all talking about these civics education programs, is that this acknowledges, this acknowledgement is reflected, for example, in the New York Times landmark 1619 project and in the resources of the Smithsonian. So that's who put it all together. So they want to focus, we want a new equity agenda to address systemic racism based on the 1619 project. Federal rule slowly being pushed down through our entire education system. This just happened a couple months ago. They proposed it, and then May was in the comment section. They want to quickly, here's an eye chart, but I just want to focus. What laws do we have in Idaho when it comes to teaching systemic racism? Okay, so first let's look at our Idaho Constitution. It's Article 9, Section 6, and the part that I highlighted was talking about, it says, nor shall any distinction or classification of pupils be made on account of race or color. And then no books, papers, tracts, or documents of a political, sectarian, or denomination character shall be used or introduced in any school established under the provisions of this article, nor shall any teacher or any district receive any of the public school monies in which the schools have not been taught in accordance with the provisions of this article. So if you're teaching one race is superior to another, and isn't it already in our Constitution that we should not be teaching racism? So this last legislative session, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, in the legislature, we started debating why we need to stop this critical race theory in our education system. Our current governor of the State Board of Education, they have all said, we are not teaching critical race theory in our schools. But yet we're seeing examples of it. And so we debated this in the legislature, and I had a very strong, powerful bill. It got watered down. What they came up with is this House Bill 377, and I will try to, it's the bottom right-hand corner talks about that no public institution of higher education shall direct or otherwise compel students to personally affirm, adopt, or adhere to any of these tenets, primarily that a sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, national origin is inherently superior or inferior, and that you shouldn't be adversely treated based on it. So the key words there is what they did with this legislation. They said, hey, as a teacher, I can't compel you to affirm that you're superior to another race. But I can still advocate for it. I can still teach it. I can still, have assignments about it. So you can see there's a little bit of a problem here now where our Constitution says that we shouldn't be teaching it at all. We try to incorporate a law saying you can't advocate for it, yet we still have our leaders saying it's not happening a lot. So that's where I want to show you some examples of where it's happening in Idaho and what it looks like, so that you can be aware when you're watching TV and when you're seeing curriculum across your desk. What does critical race theory really look like? This is a long story. I'm going to try to abbreviate it. But essentially, the federal government wanted to give a nonprofit here in Idaho $18 million. It was $6 million over a 3-year period. So we're just fighting over the $6 million this year. $18 million for early childhood development. So this is 0 to 5-year-olds. Their Idaho organization, the Idaho Association for Education of Young Children, also belongs to a national education. You can see this NAEYC. They have a specific position statement on advancing equity. That's where I want to highlight some of their definitions. One, that whiteness, for example, confers privilege, as does being male. They had the structural, I'm just going to read some of the lingo, because these are the words that highlight what critical race theory is. We get into ableism, bias, equity, diversity, equitable learning opportunities, gender identity, historical trauma, inclusion, intersectionality, marginalization, microaggressions, oppression, privilege, race, racism, sexism, stereotypes, structural inequities, white fragility. So white fragility is a concept based on the observation that white people in North America and other parts of the world live in a social environment that protects and insulates them from race-based stress, heightening their expectations for racial comfort and lowering their ability to tolerate racial stress. So, I know, right? So that's where they were wanting to give teachers some how to advance equity when teaching 0 to 5-year-olds. On our Idaho website, which is this picture over on the left, you can see it up at Idaho AEYC. Down here, they had a workshop resources. You could click on classroom literature. About 12 pages of recommended books and literature that teachers could help teach these little kids about equity. So I went to the library and I checked a bunch of them out, and I kept them on my desk drawer in the house so everybody can see. But they're the one, and I put one was Not My Idea, a book about whiteness. Favorite of that book. Racism is a white person's problem, and we're all caught up in it. Here's the other one: is A is for activists. They call it, it's let's see, the summary of it. It's a board book written and illustrated for the next generation of progressives, families who want their kids to grow up in a space that is unapologetic about activism, environmental justice, civil rights, LGBTQ rights, and everything else that activists believe in and fight for. So I'm going to just point out a few. So mind you, this book, this is for a child, 0 to 5 years old. We have A's for activists, equal rights, environmental justice, little d for democracy. Are we a democracy?
No.
F for feminism, J for justice, justice for the janitors, justicia for all, LGBTQ, love who you choose because love is true, liberate your notions of limited emotions, celebrate with pride, our links to devotion. The one Q is for questioning, S is for sun, red for reds. Okay, and U is my favorite. It says U is for weekends. U is for the workers' rights. Wait, that's not U, that's W. U is for unions. V is for Vox. Anybody know what Vox is? I have no idea. It's a high school group for Planned Parenthood. Then you have X for Malcolm X, Y, that one knows. Okay, and C is for Zapatista. So it's right socialist fighter. Anyhow, these are the books they're wanting to bring in. Okay. Thankfully, by the grace of God, we killed that grant by one vote.
Wow.
One person. One vote. Yeah. I don't know if anybody wants to. Yes.
And how hard did the governor demand that we fight not?
Yeah, he was tweeting about it the very last day of session. Like, you have to do this to our children. Yeah.
You know,
So,
It needs to be part
yeah.
the component that is so obviously absent from any of this is the risk factors associated with modernism. And it's almost like we're doing all this so that we don't have to take responsibility ourselves. We can blame the problems on someone else rather than.
You had a question earlier.
Yes,
Sorry.
I did. It's kind of on a different point now, but how do they think that promoting the 1619 initiative and the belief that Americans started with the first Catholic slaves, how do they think that is going to promote socialism, and what's the connect there?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. And I might just let you have these, because it's, I don't know if there's an easy question. I think when you go back to Marxist principles, it's all about just destroying our government and family and removing the existence of God from all of it. And so I think it's all part of that grand plan. And when you can root people against one another, you go back to that quote, is America is never going to fall from somebody outside of the country, they're going to fall from within. And so how do you do that? And we see it even in the Republican Party. How do you destroy the Republican Party? Infighting. How do you destroy the will of American people? Infighting. And so by creating this oppressed and oppressor, infighting, so I think it's all the works of the devil. I think there is a link there, but I will let you read these. Okay, yes, sir.
By producing infighting, one of the casualties of that is faith in America, the belief in America, because the oppressors, the white people, don't like where America is going, and the oppressed don't like what they're taught to see America as.
So this is a fun one. I went ahead when I checked out these books, I did a quick little story time. We'll see if the audio works here.
Story time. I'm Priscilla Giddings.
It's still like
Some people get more while others get less because policies don't always grant equal access. Racism is a white person's problem, and we are all caught up in it. Our radical reds, the headlines say, ruinous rioters, the rumors spread, rabble-rousing riffraff. Really? You can't have a shimmery skirt, Casey, she said. Why, Casey asked. Because boys don't wear shimmery skirts, said Jessie. Right, Mama? Mama thought for a minute. If Casey wants to wear a skirt, Casey can wear a skirt, she said. I don't have a problem with that. We wanted to share some of these stories with you because we've discovered that there are millions of dollars.
So the other interesting part about that is those books, a whole bunch of them, are in every library because libraries are required to have equity in which books they have. So they have to have equal amounts of books on every subject. And so there's, that's part of how libraries are doing it. So, okay, let's jump into K through 12 examples. Let's see, we'll start with, so EL education. It's a type of curriculum that school districts can buy into. It's also available for free to some school districts. They support Black Lives Matter. Can't see it right here, but here's their entire curriculum. At the very bottom, I'd say, so the grade 3 module students will explore the racial and gender stereotypes in Peter Pan. That's part of their curriculum. Here are the 4 elementary schools in Idaho who have bought in to be partners with this curriculum. We have Anzer, Garden City, Palouse Prairie up in Moscow, Pocatello Community, and Sunnyside Elementary over in Idaho Falls. So I was, I go around, I said, well, we have several examples, but I don't know, and I think there are more. There are some schools that are using this curriculum for free, but they haven't bought into the partners. Mind you, the school district, so the school board gets to decide what curriculum they use. So every school district has kind of that flexibility. There's no real state mandate per se. This one, a substitute teacher sent this to me from a bulletin board in a Boise school. So they, explorers wanted, but not necessarily in a good way. You can see they're really bashing on Christopher Columbus. He's a stealer of credit. He takes people for slaves. He treats other tribes rudely. And so that's the Native Americans and so reward a lifetime supply of food and $1,000 gold. So this one was the part that got me. They're bashing this guy. Claimed that he belonged to the Native Americans. He killed way too many of great hogs, and now they are extinct. So in this red handwriting right here, notice it doesn't look like the children's handwriting. It's in a red pen and it's kind of adult handwriting. And it says, we want him alive so we can kill him ourselves. So there again, I think it plays into the narrative of historical revisionism and getting away from the original foundation of our country. Okay, this is also a similar elementary school right down the road from that one, where the students were tasked to make social justice posters. Social justice is the other terminology, kind of like critical theory. It's an umbrella over this critical race theory. Let's see, they want to this one's talking about how I can make a difference. I can protest at the Capitol against guns. How we want to support Black Lives Matter. I will speak up for Black lives and what they believe is fair. So a bunch of different signs here as part of their social justice curriculum. Okay, that same teacher showed this to the kids.
All skin colors are as good as each other. That's why we should be treated the same. But for far too long, Black people have suffered. So all around the world we're saying that must change. Don't be afraid. You have a choice. Speak up. Use your voice. Say that's not fair. It's not okay. It's not right for you to be that way. Why don't you come? Listen, run, love each other, make some noise, sing together. Boys, girls, everywhere, let's change the world. It's fair, you should best declare that Black Lives Matter. So if you see someone being mean to another because of the color of their skin, tell them that's not right. We're all sisters and brothers. You don't need to hate when you can let love in. Don't be afraid. You have a choice. Speak up. Use your voice. Say that's not fair. It's not okay. It's not right for you to be that way. Why don't you come? Listen, run, love each other, make some noise, sing together. Boys, girls, everywhere, let's change the world. Make it fair. Me and you should both declare the Black Lives
So fascinating, right? Because what, as Christians, and we absolutely teach loving one another. We absolutely teach equality, that we should all be fair. We have come through an entire history of equality for people and treating each other as God sees each other in your heart, right? But you see how they've taken truth and they've twisted it. And now, I mean, with the, obviously the fist is blatant. The other thing is this BLM movement, which is huge. And I won't focus on it for long. I'm running out of time already, but BLM in this last, in October, they have filed, they're now a political action group. So in 4 months' time, they raised $1 million and were successful with 40 campaigns nationwide. So it is a blatant political movement. And we can kind of almost go back to that Constitution where these political things are not supposed to be taught in school. So you have several layers here. It looks like I've stirred some questions. Did somebody, okay, yes.
It's not so much of a question, but an observation. I mean, if they were sincere about that message, I mean, about 80% of that video I agreed with. You know, love everybody. Yes. So why isn't their message all lives matter? It just shows that they're not genuine in their message. If you apply a little bit of logic to that, it screams, we are not authentic.
So I want to give you a couple, yes, sir.
Yeah, I think their response, thinking from the left, their response to that would be, because they've set it up this way, any inequity is due to racism. Anything at all. So when they set it up that way, get that ingrained, then any comment that you make, which is completely valid, they're going to say, but the problem is racism. Not that, actually, we do agree on 80% of it, but it's racism is a problem. And so that has to be the first message. Everything, all inequity is due to racism, not any other factors, including homes and so on. Yeah.
What about, I've heard some other objections to this, but what about, well, it's not just Black people. German Jews were mostly white, weren't they? And no Irish need apply. And all the, people, Japanese people during World War II were murdered in camps. Why aren't they saying anything about that? Why is it just Black people?
Exactly. Yeah, Daryl.
I have a little bit of experience with being Black. Black Lives Matter is nothing about Black lives. It is completely Marxist. Completely. It's to trip you up on a slogan and to make you feel better. And they'll point at you, they'll go after you, and turn it around on you and make it your fault. That's what Black Lives Matter is. It's Marxist. Put that right on.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.
I heard this one saying this Black lives only matter once every 4 years.
So, okay, we're gonna press. So I think the biggest thing I'm trying to highlight when we go through more examples is that this is being taught right here in Idaho, even though we have constitution and laws that say we shouldn't. So the big example that has come out of Coeur d'Alene just in the last month or so is that they have established equity framework for their entire school district. And it's a long, I'd be happy to send it to you, it's this long document about how you have operations and system and how we're going to teach this in professional development and how we change it, what equality looks like versus what equity looks like and how to transition from one to the other. Okay, so then the fun one that I was just in the news for yesterday. So we have another task force meeting coming up. We're focusing on K through 12. So I sent a public records request to the Boise School District asking them for their materials about this. They have a program called Teaching Tolerance. They have an Abbott Advanced via Individual Determination. They have a lot of critical race theory inside of that. And then I asked for all the EL education materials. Remember the EL education where they were also supporting Black Lives Matter in the 4 elementary schools and their curriculum stuff. And they wrote back and blasted it to the whole world. So they can't to look through all their curriculum, it would take them at $43 an hour for the number of people, it would take $16,000 for them to review it all. The Avid education is, even though the law says that we can review, may examine materials, books, curriculum, resources, and education, that's Idaho Code 7412. They said, well, Avid education materials are trade secrets. And Idaho Code says you don't have to reveal trade secrets. The EL specific curriculum, they say, is taught at 5 elementary schools, 1 junior high, and 3 high schools. That's just in the Boise School District. So it's not just those 4 elementary schools. It's 5, and so that's only one within Boise. So now we've got 4 more, and junior high and high school. And that's 5,900 pages of records. And if we pay the teachers to review it all and look at it, it's $121,000 for you to review all that. And then I'd asked if they had anything on 1619 project or the 1776, if any of the teachers were teaching that. And so, well, we'd have to contact 1,509 teachers, and at $4,300 an hour to see if any of them are using those materials. That will cost you $16,448.
Haven't they heard of an email blast?
Yeah.
Haven't they emailed all their teachers?
Yeah, so they did an email blast to parents and teachers saying Representative Giddings is targeting them and gonna waste taxpayer dollars.
Oh, but they can't ask them a question.
Can the individual, if the individual were willing to do the research, would they provide us the library to do the research in of their material? If we got a group.
Partially, and yes, so that's actually, I'm gonna sit down, I need a group of volunteers, and let's set a date, and let's go down there, because they said, yeah, it says, please indicate what date and time you plan to examine these records, so we can plan accordingly.
All right.
From 8 till 4:30. That's a good one.
So
Okay,
why can't, as a state legislator, you say, okay, those numbers are fine, we'll just take it out of your budget. So any money you save comes back to you and what you can spend.
remember, do you remember the vote count on the childhood grant? Remember the vote count?
Yeah, by 1,
Yeah, so you think it's gonna pass?
no.
Okay, so higher education. This is a long sob story also, but we did a dive, we found about $20 million being used to advocate for social justice, critical race theory in our higher education. This is just a couple examples for you to see. So from left to right, these are just screen captures from my phone. They had this, okay, how to be an anti-racist. Okay, that's this book. He's one of the thought leaders of critical race theory. He's about my age, professor. He's paid $40,000, $50,000 to go into companies and corporations and to teach them how to be anti-racist. Yeah, I haven't had the will to read it all, but let me, page 19. If discrimination is creating equity, then it's anti-racist. I didn't get that one. Okay, the only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. Catch that? So the only way we're going to stop racism is to use racism against the people who are not stopping the racism. And so there's the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. So we're breeding more racism. Okay, so, and it's racism in all aspects of society, including the legal system. So that's why this is the U of I law class that was required to do this. It was an online program. It was a panel discussion. These panelists, I mean, one of them has a degree in radical right-wing ideology, combating radical right-wingers. That was what her degree is in. And the law students were required. Yeah, that was a whole interesting other thing. So a lot of students, they gave us a transcript of all the things that were said. Very disturbing, very one-sided. So not covering both sides of the issue. And in that same law class, they were teaching the law students that when you do sentencing, you need to change the way you sentence when you become a judge and based on a person's race. So they're giving another example of it, okay? The next one is a University of Idaho. To get access on their website, they have Black Lives Matter resources. And I really called them out on things they said they're supporting it. So we're not supporting it, we're just providing resources. So then why is the word there? You know, why, the rainbow one, that is a student, genetics 202 class at BSU, where they are teaching that sex is a spectrum. We got a lot of feedback from BSU students about students required to do an assignment to write a paper why I'm privileged as a white female. Yeah. Another one, upload a video to YouTube condemning toxic masculinity. It goes back to the idea of being white, you're a white male, you're inherently racist. So you're also privileged as a white male. You're privileged a little less so as a white female, but you're still privileged. And so if you condemn toxic masculinity. This one just came across my phone this morning. This is Idaho State University on the far right. You can see ISU, how they've got in their Department of Counseling a whole supporting Black Lives Matter there as well. Okay, Idaho Public Television, here's another fun one. So on the left, you can see it's Idaho PBS right here. How and why to teach your children about racism. We were right in the middle of their budget, and Representative Nate saw there was a program on, he was getting ready for work one morning, and it was talking about how do we combat racism. And it's telling these kids, I think it was a Daniel Tiger thing, telling the kids that the first place you have to start is to tell your parents that they're part of the problem, and they can help stop racism. Your white parents, that is. And you can see here that they did a very, not very scientifically accurate study where they figured out, when they decided that babies have the ability to recognize racial differences and have racist tendencies as early as 3 months old.
What?
It's right here. Right here. 3 months. That's why we have to focus on teaching these babies not to be racist. So the same thing. So PBS, same thing over here. Here's their definitions down here. So you don't start to notice racism, anti-racism is talking about race and racism, understanding that all racial groups are equals, seeing that there are different colors and different cultures and we should value them all equally. Here we go, Black Lives Matter. A movement that advocates for non-violent civil disobedience to protest police brutality and other racially motivated violence against Black people. And then you got the white privilege. White privilege means that white people do not struggle with being treated unfairly because of their race or skin color. It doesn't mean white families do not experience struggles. They're just racist. Great. I want to share a little bit more about the task force. So it's kind of a fun story how it all happened. The legislature was trying to kill the lieutenant governor's budget. And so I proposed this alternative budget to increase it by $4,000 so that we can fund a task force on critical race theory. Of course, that got shut down. But we went ahead and did the task force anyway. So we asked for volunteers across the state. We got teachers, former school board members, lawyers, parishioners, business owners, and they're all volunteering their time to come down to the Capitol once a month for 4 months. We had a meeting May, June, July, August. The first meeting, we talked about let's define it. You know, we had that Boise meeting where they couldn't even define it. So we had a lot of discussion about what is it, what's the enemy here, what are we up against? This next meeting coming up on the 24th, we're going to go through the K-12 examples, and I'm still, asking for parents and feedback to share their examples. We have a half dozen or so right now, but we're going to walk through all of these examples in the K-12 classroom. See how is it here or is it not? And then the next meeting we'll talk about higher education, and then the task force is going to try to come up with some recommendations. Either if that's legislation or creating a database to help pull in the examples. And there's been a lot of good material about how do we push back against this. And this was out of the in-premise, they made a few recommendations, but I threw in there just the increasing public awareness. And that's, I think, one of the primary goals of this task force, is that we have to know what it looks like, we have to know what the terminology is, so that you don't get fooled in this concept that equity means equality, because it's the difference between our republic and socialism. I mean, it's that huge. And then the government action as far as the legislation and working grassroots. And then it's grassroots mobilization. I know you guys are hearing examples across the state where parents are going to school boards and they're pushing back. Yeah, and they are victorious if we can activate the grassroots. And then we'll just have to be able to talk to it and appeal to people. So I think I think I'm right on target there for time. I think I'm done. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Right here.
So if I could then talk about the hierarchy of principles. A lot of the questions talk about justice. Sometimes we talk about peace. Of course, we want freedom. Of all those principles, how are they classified and ranked? That is called the principles, hierarchy of principles. The top of all is truth, followed by freedom, and then justice, and then finally peace. Not